Research is hard, but your tools should not be. Subthesis.com is the free alternative to expensive software. Whether you need to calculate Cronbach's alpha or organize your field notes, Subthesis has a tool for it. No paywalls and no registration required. Check the link in the description and let's dive into today's lesson. Welcome back to the Graduate School Prep Series. For many graduate students, federal student loans become part of their funding picture. Understanding these programs thoroughly helps you make informed decisions about borrowing. Federal loans offer significant advantages over private alternatives: fixed interest rates set by law, flexible repayment options, potential forgiveness programs, and borrower protections during financial hardship. But there's still debt that must be repaid. Borrowing decisions made during graduate school affect your financial life for years or decades afterward. This video provides comprehensive information about federal loan programs for graduate students. By the end, you'll understand your options, the application process, and strategies to borrow wisely if borrowing becomes necessary. Here's what you'll learn. First, you'll understand the types of federal loans available specifically to graduate students. Different loan types have different terms, limits, and implications. Second, you'll navigate the FAFSA process and loan application procedures. These administrative steps are required to access federal aid, and understanding them prevents delays. Third, you'll evaluate borrowing decisions based on your program costs and expected career outcomes. Not all borrowing is equal. Context matters. Fourth, you'll apply strategies to minimize borrowing while still covering your educational costs. If you must borrow, borrowing smartly reduces long-term costs. Let's start with understanding the federal loan landscape. Direct unsubsidized loans are the standard federal loan option for graduate students. They're available regardless of financial need. You don't have to demonstrate hardship to qualify. Completing FAFSA and meeting basic eligibility requirements is sufficient. The annual borrowing limit is $20,500. This amount is per academic year, not per program. Multi-year programs allow cumulative borrowing up to aggregate limits. Interest accrues during school, which is what unsubsidized means. Unlike undergraduate subsidized loans where the government pays interest during enrollment, graduate students are responsible for all interest from the day funds are disbursed. You can defer payments until after graduation, but unpaid interest capitalizes, meaning it gets added to your principal balance. Interest rates are fixed and set annually by Congress based on market conditions. Rates vary year to year, but remain fixed for the life of your individual loan. Check current rates when you're borrowing. These loans should be your first choice among federal loan options due to their relatively favorable terms. Direct Plus loans, also called Grad Plus loans, provide additional borrowing capacity beyond direct unsubsidized limits. The borrowing limit is up to your cost of attendance minus other financial aid received. If your program costs $50,000 and you receive $10,000 in scholarships and $20,500 in direct unsubsidized loans, you can borrow up to $19,500 in Plus loans to cover the gap. Plus loans require a credit check, unlike direct unsubsidized loans. However, the credit criteria are less strict than private lenders require. You'll be denied only for adverse credit history, not for lack of credit or low credit scores. Even with adverse history, endorsers or appeal processes may help you qualify. The interest rate on Plus loans is higher than on direct unsubsidized loans. This rate premium reflects the additional risk associated with higher borrowing limits and credit requirements. The same fixed rate structure applies. Despite the higher rates, Plus loans are generally preferable to private loans due to federal protections, income-driven repayment access, and potential forgiveness eligibility. Understanding interest rate realities helps you grasp the true cost of borrowing. Rates are set annually based on market conditions specifically tied to the 10-year Treasury note. Check current rates when you're actually borrowing. They change each July 1st for loans disbursed that academic year. Historical rates for graduate federal loans have ranged roughly from 5 to 8% in recent decades. This is higher than rates during the historically low period of the early 2020s, but lower than many private alternatives. Interest compounds during deferment if you don't make payments while in school. Unpaid interest gets capitalized into your principal balance at repayment, meaning you then pay interest on your accumulated interest. This significantly increases total costs. Total repayment substantially exceeds the amount you borrow. On a standard 10-year repayment plan, you might repay 30% or more above your principal in interest charges. On extended or income-driven plans, total interest paid can equal or exceed the original principal. Understand the true cost, not just the borrowed amount. The free application for federal student aid is required to access federal loans. Completing FAFSA is essential regardless of whether you think you'll need loans. It keeps your options open and is required for many scholarships too. File using the IRS data retrieval tool when possible. This tool imports your tax information directly, reducing errors and simplifying verification processes. For most applicants, it makes the process faster and more accurate. FAFSA opens October 1st each year for the following academic year. Filing early doesn't necessarily get you more aid, but it ensures you meet all deadlines and keeps processes moving smoothly. Don't wait until the last minute. List all schools you're considering on your FAFSA. Each school receives your information and can include federal aid in their financial aid packages. You can add schools later, but listing them initially saves time. If admitted to programs, you'll receive financial aid award letters based on your FAFSA information. You don't have to accept federal loans that are offered. Accepting admission doesn't mean accepting loans. Understanding loan disbursement helps you manage your finances. Loan funds are disbursed directly to your school and applied to your charges, including tuition, fees, and on-campus housing if applicable. You don't receive a check for tuition. The school takes it directly. Any amount exceeding your school charges is refunded to you for living expenses. If you borrow $15,000 and your charges are $12,000, you receive a $3,000 refund. This covers housing, food, transportation, and other costs. Entrance counseling is required before your first federal loan disbursement. This online module explains your rights and responsibilities as a borrower. It takes about 30 minutes and must be completed once per school. Track your loan balances through studentaid.gov, the official federal student aid website. This portal shows all your federal loans, current balances, servicer information, and repayment status. Check it regularly to understand your accumulating debt. Federal loans have aggregate limits on total borrowing across your education. The total federal loan limit for graduate students is $138,500 in direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans combined. This includes any undergraduate borrowing you've already done. If you borrowed $23,000 during undergraduate, you can borrow up to $115,500 more during graduate school under the standard limits. Direct plus loans don't count toward this aggregate limit. Since plus borrowing is based on cost of attendance, students at expensive programs can accumulate significantly more debt through plus loans beyond the standard limits. Certain health professions have higher aggregate limits. Medical students, for example, have higher caps to accommodate the extreme costs of medical education. If you're in a health profession, check your specific field's limits. These limits exist to protect borrowers from accumulating unmanageable debt, but they may not prevent you from borrowing more than you can reasonably repay. Federal loans offer multiple repayment plan options, providing flexibility that private loans lack. Standard repayment spreads your balance over 10 years with fixed monthly payments. This minimizes total interest paid but results in higher monthly payments than other options. Graduated repayment starts with lower payments that increase every 2 years. This helps if you expect your income to grow but results in more total interest than standard repayment. Extended repayment spreads payments over up to 25 years if you owe more than $30,000. Monthly payments are lower, but you pay significantly more interest over time. Income-driven repayment plans base your monthly payment on your income and family size, typically capping payments at 10 to 20% of discretionary income. Several specific plans exist, including SAVE, PAIE, and IBR, each with slightly different calculations. We'll discuss these in detail in a later video on loan repayment strategies. The key point is flexibility. If standard payments are unaffordable after graduation, alternatives exist. This flexibility is a major advantage of federal loans over private loans. Deferment and forbearance allow you to temporarily reduce or pause payments when you're unable to pay. Deferment temporarily postpones payments. While enrolled at least half-time, you're automatically in deferment. Other deferment types exist for unemployment, economic hardship, and specific situations. Forbearance provides temporary payment reduction or pause in situations where you don't qualify for deferment but can't afford payments. Forbearance is generally easier to obtain but has fewer protections. Interest continues accruing during both deferment and forbearance on unsubsidized loans. Your balance grows even though you're not making payments. This increases your total repayment burden. Use these options strategically when genuinely needed, but understand the long-term cost. The most important thing is avoiding default. If you can't make payments, contact your servicer about deferment, forbearance, or income-driven repayment before you miss payments. Missing payments damages your credit, using available programs doesn't. Federal loans may qualify for forgiveness programs that cancel remaining balances after meeting specific requirements. Public service loan forgiveness cancels remaining balances after 120 qualifying payments while working full-time for qualifying public service employers. This includes government agencies, nonprofits, and certain other organizations. For public health professionals in government or nonprofit roles, PSLF can be tremendously valuable. Income-driven repayment plans include forgiveness of remaining balances after 20 to 25 years of qualifying payments depending on the specific plan. This provides a backstop for those who can't achieve PSLF but have manageable income-based payments over time. Teacher loan forgiveness and other profession-specific programs exist for certain fields. These typically require service in high-need areas or shortage fields. Requirements for forgiveness are strict. You must make qualifying payments, work for qualifying employers, and maintain proper documentation. Track compliance carefully from the beginning. Retroactively claiming forgiveness is difficult. We'll cover PSLF and repayment strategies in detail in later videos. The key point here is that federal loans offer forgiveness possibilities that private loans don't. Determining how much to borrow requires careful calculation, not just accepting maximum available amounts. Calculate your actual educational costs comprehensively. Include tuition, fees, books, supplies, housing, food, transportation, health insurance, and other genuine expenses. Be realistic, but not excessive. Subtract all other funding sources: scholarships, fellowships, assistantships, employer contributions, savings, family support, and any other resources. Reduce what you need to borrow. Exhaust these sources before turning to loans. Borrow only the remaining gap between costs and other resources. Just because you can borrow $20,000 doesn't mean you should if $15,000 covers your genuine needs. Every dollar borrowed accrues interest and requires repayment. Consider your post-graduation earning expectations. The standard guidelines suggest total educational debt shouldn't exceed your expected first-year salary. If you expect to earn $50,000, keeping debt below $50,000 is advisable. This isn't a hard rule, but it provides a sanity check. Higher debt-to-income ratios create repayment difficulties. Implement strategies to minimize how much you need to borrow. Maximize free money first. Apply broadly for scholarships and fellowships as we discussed earlier. Every dollar in scholarships is a dollar you don't need to borrow or repay. Work part-time if feasible without harming your academic progress. Graduate assistantships provide funding and experience. Part-time work in your field builds your resume. The key is ensuring work doesn't compromise your educational success. Live frugally during school. Housing choices, lifestyle decisions, and discretionary spending affect how much you need to borrow. Modest sacrifices during school prevent years of repayment after. Make interest payments during school if possible, even small amounts. Paying accruing interest prevents capitalization and reduces your total repayment. Even $50 monthly in interest payments compounds to significant savings over time. These strategies won't eliminate borrowing for many students, but they reduce total debt and its long-term impact on your finances. If you need to borrow beyond federal limits, understand how private loans differ. Federal loans offer fixed interest rates set by law. Private loans often have variable rates that can increase over time, or fixed rates higher than federal alternatives. Federal repayment is flexible with income-driven options and hardship provisions. Private lenders typically offer less flexibility if you struggle to pay. Federal loans may qualify for forgiveness programs. Private loans almost never do. Federal loans access doesn't require credit checks for standard options. Private loans require good credit or credit-worthy co-signers. The guidance is clear. Always exhaust federal options before considering private loans. Borrow through direct unsubsidized first, then plus if needed, then private only if absolutely necessary after all federal options are exhausted. If you find yourself considering private loans, that's a signal to reassess. Is this program affordable? Are there less expensive alternatives? Is the career return worth this debt level? Private borrowing for graduate school often indicates a mismatch between program costs and realistic funding. Tax benefits can reduce the net cost of education and student loan repayment. The student loan interest deduction allows you to deduct up to $2,500 of student loan interest paid annually from your taxable income. This reduces your tax liability and effectively lowers your interest rate. Income limits apply. The Lifetime Learning Credit provides a tax credit of up to $2,000 per year for qualified education expenses. Unlike deductions, credits directly reduce your tax owed. Income limits and restrictions apply. Tax treatment of fellowships and scholarships varies. Amounts applied to tuition and required fees are generally not taxable. Amounts for living expenses are generally taxable income even if called fellowship. These rules affect your actual take-home funding. Tax situations are individual and complex. These general principles may not apply to your specific circumstances. Consult a tax professional about education-related tax benefits available to you. Professional guidance often pays for itself in tax savings. Active management during school prevents post-graduation surprises. Track your balances regularly through studentaid.gov. Know how much you've borrowed, what interest has accrued, and what your expected repayment will be. Ignorance doesn't reduce what you owe. Understand your total obligation before graduation. Many students are shocked by their debt totals because they didn't track accumulation. Don't be surprised. Know your numbers throughout. Know your loan servicer and their contact information. Servicers manage your loans and are your point of contact for questions, repayment options, and problems. Identify who services your loans before you need to contact them. Consider paying interest during school if you can afford to. Even small payments prevent interest capitalization. If your budget allows any flexibility, directing funds to interest payments reduces your long-term burden. These management practices during school set you up for smoother repayment after graduation. The transition from school to repayment deserves attention. A 6-month grace period begins after you graduate, leave school, or drop below half-time enrollment. During grace period, you're not required to make payments, but interest continues accruing on unsubsidized loans. Use the grace period to prepare for repayment, not to ignore your loans. Get settled in your job, understand your budget, and select your repayment plan. Don't let 6 months pass without planning. Select your repayment plan before payments start. You'll be placed on standard repayment by default, but you can choose income-driven or other options that may better fit your situation. Make this choice proactively rather than defaulting into a plan. Exit counseling is required before graduation. This online module reviews your loan balances, repayment options, and obligations. Complete it even though it's required. The information is useful. The transition period sets the tone for your repayment experience. Proactive attention now prevents problems later. Recognize warning signs that you may be borrowing too much. If your total debt significantly exceeds your expected starting salary, you're heading toward repayment difficulties. A 2-to-1 debt-to-income ratio or higher signals serious concern. If you're borrowing private loans on top of maximum federal borrowing, the debt level is becoming dangerous. This typically indicates attending a program you can't afford or borrowing for living expenses beyond what's necessary. If you can't articulate how you'll repay your loans, you haven't thought through the decision adequately. You should be able to explain your expected income, repayment plan, and timeline for becoming debt-free. If your career field has modest income potential, high debt levels become particularly problematic. A teacher or social worker borrowing $150,000 faces a fundamentally different situation than a doctor borrowing the same amount. These red flags don't necessarily mean you shouldn't proceed, but they demand serious reflection about whether you're making a sustainable decision. Before accepting federal loans, verify these points. Have you exhausted all scholarship and free money options? Every dollar in scholarships is a dollar you don't need to borrow or repay. Make sure you've maximized free funding before turning to loans. Have you calculated the minimum necessary borrowing amount? Don't borrow maximum available just because you can. Calculate your actual costs and other resources to identify the genuine gap requiring loans. Do you understand the interest rates and total repayment cost? Know the current interest rate, how interest accumulates, and what your total repayment will be over time. The borrowed amount is not the total cost. Have you considered your career earning potential and repayment feasibility? Can you realistically afford the payments on the income you expect? Have you thought through income-driven repayment or forgiveness if necessary? This reflection before borrowing prevents regret after graduation. Let's summarize the key points about federal student loans. Federal loans offer significantly better terms than private alternatives: fixed rates, flexible repayment, forgiveness potential, and borrower protections. If you must borrow, federal loans should be your first and ideally only loan source. Borrow only what you genuinely need after exhausting other funding options. Calculate your actual costs, subtract other resources, and borrow the minimum necessary gap. Just because you can borrow more doesn't mean you should. Understand your repayment obligations before graduation, not after. Know your total debt, expected payments, and repayment options. Track balances during school and prepare for the transition to repayment. Use available flexibility wisely if repayment proves challenging. Income-driven plans, deferment, forbearance, and forgiveness programs exist to help borrowers who struggle. Use them when needed, but understand their long-term implications. In our next video, we'll discuss loan repayment strategies specifically for doctoral students, addressing the unique challenges and opportunities facing those with extended educational timelines. Thank you for your attention, and I'll see you in the next video. Writing the thesis is a marathon, not a sprint, but you do not have to run it alone. If you are feeling stuck with your data or overwhelmed by your sources, let us help. Head over to subthesis.com. It is completely free and designed to make your life easier. You are making progress. Keep going. And don't forget to subscribe for more support.